Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch Podcast. Today's episode is a special one because I'm sitting down with someone I've known and respected for a long time, Jay Waggoner. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to recruit for Jay. I've worked with him when he's been a client and watch him build an outstanding career in medical devices. He's helped launch innovative technologies, built exceptional relationships with high-level doctors, and earned a reputation as someone who simply does things the right way. Today, we're going to talk about the lessons he's learned over decades in the industry, what separates the best sales professionals from everyone else, where medical technology is headed, and why relationships still matter more than ever. And there's another reason this conversation is special. Today also marks the beginning of a new chapter because I'm excited to officially welcome Jay to the Chase MedSearch team. I couldn't be happier to have him with us, and I think you're going to enjoy getting to know him. Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Jordan, thank you very much. And I say everything you just said is mutual. I feel so excited to be part of Chase MedSearch, and I know we're already going, so it's a fun ride. It's actually interesting to me because I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks too, and it's fun to be at my age and be learning something new, so I'm happy.
Absolutely. We've dropped you in the deep end of the pool, and you're swimming very well. So the whole team loves working with you. They were just talking about it yesterday. So really glad to have you aboard. Give us real quick, Jay, a 2-minute version of your career for those who don't know you. Where have you been, and what are some of the stops you've had along the way?
I was thinking about all the fun I've had in the last, it's been 34 years of med device, but I'll tell you a quick story. I didn't start in med device. I started in food service and lodging products. So for all those young people out there that, are aspiring to get into med device, probably the best way that I remember, and it's still, I think, true today, is go get a good B2B job and perform. And that's what I did. I was calling the backs of kitchens and selling deep frying oil, Jordan. It was so different than med device, but it got me to med device. In my career, I've been fortunate to be in roles in the West Coast, the Southwest, Mid-Atlantic, and then now we reside in New England and have for the last 20 years. And in my career, I think I've touched almost everything in an OR that's disposable. Some capital, but mostly disposable. And I've either sold it, I've managed it, or I have trained to it. So it's been great. And then the last, before joining Chase MedSearch, the last 9 years, I was in charge of the country. So I got a chance to visit those places I'd never been, right? And I can tell you all about Alabama. I can tell you about a lot of different places that I didn't know about. And there's great medicine down there, and there's great people.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great perspective. And I mean, you spent decades building commercial organizations at companies like J&J, Medtronic, Solstice Medical, Misonix, LifeNet Health. It's been a great career. Looking back, what do you think you're the most proud of?
Yeah, I think two things, Jordan. And by the way, I do believe in a career progression, right? So before I give you those two things, I think that, my grounding, my training, my how good I am, partially comes from the big company exposure, right? Because big companies, they have the bandwidth to train you and to teach you, and they do things that other companies just don't have the time or money for. So I'm thankful that I spent all the time at J&J and Medtronic. Those were great grounding companies and allowed me to learn a lot and then go into a startup world. But you asked the two most important things, the two things I'm maybe proudest of. To this day, some of the guys that I know have retired, but there's a bevy of people that I have touched and worked with in the last 30 years that now are in big jobs, VPs of marketing, VPs of sales, and it warms my heart to see them have such career success. I hope that I did something to help them along the way. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but it's a lot of fun to watch those people thrive. So that's one. And then I think the other one that's maybe most dramatic that I think about, and I was lived it, so it didn't seem that way when we were living it, but it is as you talk about it. We were in the startup world at Solstice, and we got sold 3 times. And, a lot of people that will listen to this will say, my company just got sold, or I just got downsized, or whatever. We got sold 3 times, yet we were able to somehow keep our core group of people together, our core managers, our core key reps, and through all 3, not just one buyout, but all 3.
Mhm.
And that's kind of astounding. Most of the time you do get downsized when somebody buys you. It just didn't happen with us, and we were able to keep really key performers together. It's like we have this group of about 15 or 20 of us. We call us we're the OGs of Solstice. So
Love it. Love it. You've had such a successful career. Your career has spanned a few decades now. Why were you open to doing something completely different?
Well, this is different, but I did spend a lot of time in the last 11 years recruiting. When you're in a startup world, people aren't flocking to go to work for Solstice. They've never heard of that company, like they might be to a Johnson & Johnson or a Medtronic. So I spent a lot of time recruiting, and I actually really thoroughly enjoyed it. But it's more than that. It's more about my purpose. I really want to help, especially young people. I want to help them break into med device. I think it's such a wonderful calling that if I can get them here and watch their careers thrive, I want to do that more as much as I can. And I was able to do it some in the startup world, but you run a country and you got a lot of things to do, including sales results. So now being a recruiter and being able to do it 24/7, it's right on my bailiwick.
Yeah. That's great. Was there a specific moment when you thought, hey, recruiting might be a next great chapter for me?
I don't know that I would go to any recruiting company and be part of them, right? It was more than that, Jordan. I've talked to you about it a lot. I wanted to recruit, and I thought it was a good idea, but I was pretty darn picky because I told you I wouldn't go anywhere else and recruit, right? Because, I've known you for 21 years, and I've had the utmost respect for your integrity, your business ethics, everything. And I know we've talked about that. That was a huge piece to me about doing this. I think I may have told you if it wasn't for that, maybe I don't become a recruiter. Maybe I would just retire.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I was honored when you called me, and I was excited. And I thought, they always say you need to hire people smarter than yourself. And I thought, this is an overhire right here. This is the textbook definition of that. But it's been so far just an absolutely great match, and been a lot of fun too. I commented on our LinkedIn post yesterday about announcing you, and I realized I had completely left off that I used to be your HR manager at Medtronic back in the day.
That's how we met.
It is how we met in neuromodulation. You were a brief shining moment in neuromod for a year. Everybody loved you, and then you were back at J&J, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Good times. Good times. You've interviewed and hired hundreds of people over your career. What separates, in your mind, the truly elite sales professionals from everyone else?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about that, because we talk about that with the reps, about being, are you going to be good or are you going to be great? Right? So many reps out there are good, and yet there is a defining line between good and great. And I'll give you an example. I'll tell you a story. One of the key strategies for a company I was with was to find these doctors who had cases after hours, because they just weren't getting block time in the OR. And the rep that was so good was able to find these doctors, go to evening cases, go to weekend cases. And Jordan, 95% of people wouldn't do that, right? I'm not going to take my evening. I'm not going to take my Saturday morning. I'm not doing that. But this rep did. And this rep was rep of the year. This rep was astoundingly successful. And it was a matter of choosing to be great. She could have easily chosen not to do those things and been good, but she chose to be great.
Yeah. That's a very salient point. I mean, you've sat on the other side of the desk. You've hired, I don't know how many people at this point. You probably don't even know a number off the top of your head. Maybe you've got an estimate. What's a mistake that you see candidates make over and over again in interviews?
Yeah, it's an easy one, and it happens, and you and I know this. They're just not prepared, right? It's funny because we, as a management team, we always grade people as they come through, right? Hey, what'd you think of that candidate? That's a B minus because of this and this and this, or that's an A plus because of this. You know, I think candidates, when they say, hey, what do you know about us? And they say, well, I looked at your website. All right. That's a D minus, Jordan. Looking at the website, that gets you precursory information. You should also contact some of their local reps. You should also go online and look for the most important news that's happened to that company in the last 6 to 12 months. You should also go to the stock market and look at how their stocks perform and why. What are their corporate earnings and why? Those are all the things that, you talk about good to great. Great interview reps will have done that, right? And that's one of the ways they separate themselves.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, it's the flip side of that. And, what immediately gets your attention in a candidate? When you think about somebody, you're like, okay, they walk in, they might be a good interview, they might not. All of a sudden, you're leaning forward, you got your elbows on the desk, and you're like, okay, there's something here with this person.
I'm not a guy that lights up the room when I come in. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm understated that way. But I'll tell you a quick story. I was interviewing for a role, sales rep role, and it was the holidays, and I was tired, the end of the year. And I was seeing this young lady at the hotel lobby, and she came around the corner, and I never met her. And she looked at me and with a huge smile and said, "Jay Waggoner." And I was like, whoa. I was like, this might be the person just in the first 5 seconds, right? Because of that attitude, because of that charisma, because of that, just that beaming smile. And it turns out we did hire her and she was great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's what they say. First impression takes 7 seconds?
7 seconds, right?
Yeah, it can be won or lost right there. And I feel like a lot of times candidates that don't prepare, they're also not ready for that first 7 seconds because the preparation gives you the confidence in interviewing, I think.
I couldn't agree more. You can tell when you're confident because you're ready, you're prepared. You're not confident, you're nervous because you don't know what's next because you're not up to speed yet. So, totally true.
I think it's a thing in athletics too. They say the practice ought to be harder than the game, and you train in the practice, actually much harder. And so you're like, by the time you get to the game, it's actually fun. You're having fun. This isn't as hard as practice was.
Yeah, we had a sales training guy who's been a consultant for the last company I was at, and he talks about pro athletes, 95% of what they do is practice. Right. So if you're getting ready for an interview, you're getting ready to, take a career step. Why wouldn't you practice? Why wouldn't you go learn everything you can? Because game time is only 5% of the time.
Yeah. Do you hire for experience or attitude when you're hiring someone?
I would probably say if we can get both, that's the best world. But I also believe strongly that you can teach people things like med device, like the anatomy of the body, like pathologies, like all those things. And so I really look for attitude. And it presents in a lot of different ways, but that's the key factor, positive attitude and the willingness to learn. One of the questions, Jordan, that we used to ask in the interview was, tell me the last time you learned something new and you put it in practice, right? Personally or professionally, because those people that could say, hey, I'm learning Spanish right now and I'm on Duolingo and I've been doing it for a year and I'm almost bilingual now. That to me is somebody that is remarkable because they're curious and they want to keep learning. And those people will do really well because they'll figure out how to learn fast in a new job.
Yeah, that's great. That intellectual curiosity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you ever hired someone who didn't have a perfect resume but turned into a superstar? And if you have, what made him special?
I was thinking about all the times I'm a little bit in my career, I've been a little bit of a risky hirer. I'll take a chance on somebody if I like their personality, if I like their attitude and their excitedness for the job. I hired one of my first hires was a young guy, and he was working in the Boston market, and he was selling copiers. And that was back in the day, right? And he was selling copiers for a company you'd never heard of. Okay. And I was like, man, how do you do this? And he says, well, I have to be creative because no one knows my product line and they don't know me. So he said, in a nice way, I drip on them. I was like, that is certainly an interesting concept to drip on someone. I said, but it couldn't, when you drip on somebody, could it be considered, too much? He said, well, you have to do it the right way. And I do. And I was like, this guy is so interesting to me with that kind of attitude about how to get in. And he was killing it in his business. And his numbers showed it on his resume.
Sorry to interrupt. What is drip marketing campaign? I've heard of those. What does
Just
he mean?
dripping on people, like being able to show up with a different piece of information, a different idea for them, a different suggestion for them over and over so that they start to look at you as a resource. Hey, every time Jay comes to me, he gives me a new idea. And I like that. Even though I may not agree with those ideas and it may feel weird, but I still like the idea that he makes me think. So that's what this rep did. And when we hired him, he crushed it in med device for years.
That's great. You've managed people through startups, acquisitions, large organizations. How has your leadership philosophy or approach evolved over the years, would you say?
Yeah, I think that it's weird because people say, how do you build these great teams, right? How do you get people to go through 3 buyouts and all stay together? And I think it's not just one person. I think it's the group collective. But I do think that the leader has to do a couple things, right? The leader has to promote trust, and trust is in every business book, and that's for sure true. And there's lots of ways to build trust. But I also think the leader needs to create vision. I can tell you part of the reason that group stayed together for 3 buyouts is because, and if you interviewed every single one of those 20 key people, they would tell you that TheraSkin was the best product they'd ever sold. And they believed it, they bought it, we gave them a vision, and everybody bought the vision and everybody worked toward the vision. And I thought that was really cool. And I think that's one of the things that leaders need to do more of is create a vision of what could be. And then show people, hey, there's the vision, now here we go get it. Here's how we do it.
Yeah. Do you think that separates what the best sales managers do consistently versus average managers, or is there something else that the best sales managers are doing as well?
Well, I think that they do create vision if they're smart. And I think the best sales managers I've ever seen are ones that lead from beside the person and not from behind. So I'll give you an example. You go on a field ride. And by the way, that separates some managers, right? Managers that don't go in the field are not worthy of being managers. You need to be in the field. Everything I've ever learned, every strategy that ever came to be, came from a customer and it came from a field visit. Good strategies come from your customers if you listen. Bad strategies come from people inside the building that don't see the customer and think this could be a good idea. So I think the manager that gets in the field is really important. When the manager's in the field, I believe that the manager should work with the rep, right? Not behind the rep, not assessing the rep. Sure, you can do all that, but you need to help them be selling with the rep. And I believe that also fosters an increasingly high level of trust within your sales team. If your reps all talk, if you're a sales manager, and they've all decided if you're worthy or not. And if you're leading from beside them and you're helping them move the business ahead and you're giving them new ideas and you've built trust with them, they will die for you. They'll run through walls for you.
Yeah. What's a lesson you wish you would have learned or someone would have taught you 20 years ago, 20 years earlier than when you learned it? Yeah.
Jordan, I think with a lesson, and this is maybe a management lesson. Again, I told you I was a little bit of a risky hirer, and sometimes that can be a home run. When you get it right, it's fun to see those people thrive. But I also believe now strongly that the best indicator of somebody's future success is their past results and past behaviors. I wonder, people say, oh, you could change that person. No, I don't know that you can. I think that it's really important to look at what they've done and why they've done it and see if that's a match for your company. So that's where I would go with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to teach interview training through DDI, and that is statistically, you're dead on. It's highly predictive. Past behavior predicts future behavior. And if you know exactly what the skill sets and the requirements are for your job, and you can interview against that and try to put people in places in their career and learn about what they did in those situations, you're going to have a higher and better result. So yeah, good stuff. you've seen a lot in your career in medical device, and it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot since I jumped in 1998. What big changes would you say you've seen over your career that people today that just got in or got in, fairly recently don't appreciate, or they don't understand, or would have no idea what you're talking about?
When I'm like, I say, hey, I'm an old guy, and back in the day, it was so hard to sell. We walked uphill both ways to the hospital. Not true. To me, in the old days, I remember going into an OR with a new product and showing it to a surgeon, going in or a 5-box order that day, right? Those days are long gone. So I think whoever invented med reps, going to give that guy that, but because access is so much harder now in the ORs, you really have to be in there for the purpose, and then you're booted out a lot of times. So we used to walk around the OR all day. That day's gone. So I think that's changed. I think the VAC process has definitely gotten, hospitals have gotten better at delaying and stopping and thinking, and that's a strategy too. They delay you for so long. They want to see, do you have it in you to keep pushing, right? Do you have any clinical support? Do you have enough surgeons saying, I got to have this? And if you don't, then they don't do anything. And that's a strategy. So I think it's gotten a lot tougher. It's still a great spot to be in because of the things we see and the people that we talk to and how quality they are. But it's certainly a challenging market for everyone now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to someone before we had this recording about the good old days where, you could invent and take a pacemaker and you could just change one or two things on it every year, and that justified a big bump in price increase. And those days are the days of the dinosaur. Those don't exist anymore. And
yeah, that's a challenging way to go about your business.
Yeah. If you were a 28-year-old sales rep today, in medical, where would you be looking to build your career? What avenue, what niche of the industry, where would you want to go?
Yeah, I don't know. Last 11 years has been in wound care, but we were in the OR, right? So we were touching, burn and plastic and ortho and a lot of those specialties. But before that, I sold disposables and managed disposables my whole career. It certainly looks to me, Jordan, like a couple things. I think about the ability for a nerve to be stimulated, and you see more and more nerves stimulated throughout the body, not just the spine, but the vagal nerve, and then you go peripheral nerves. I think there's so much electrical impulse in the body that makes a lot of sense to me that there'll be more and more nerve stimulating companies. I think that's a really cool new technology and still not in its infancy, really still. I also think about robotics. I do think that's going to be standard of care because I think that doctors will be told you have to use a robot, otherwise, we're liable probably. So I think that's going to happen. I think the third one that I think about is an interesting one. I don't know if you just saw last week, scientists were able to create a cell, and it was outside of a living organism. They created a cell. It was able to grow. It was able to replicate. It was able to eat. And I think that as that gets going, I think we get into the ability to replicate organs. And, this whole biosurgery market in this industry is going to happen. I spent, those years in wound care, and, we're putting, pig collagen on a wound. Well, pretty soon I think you'll be able to do a lot more than that and a lot more effectively. So I think that's maybe the third one, that biosurgery industry.
Sure. Or borrow your own human skin cells and
take your own cells, right? And that's already happening, but not to the extent of maybe an organ, right? It'd be amazing when the first time we can create a new pancreas and put your own pancreas back in you. And boy, that would be cool. That's coming.
I can't imagine taking someone from 100 years ago and putting them in our world today and saying, a Gila monster only eats like once or twice a year. And we're going to study that and figure out how to create a weight loss drug, a GLP-1 drug, from the Gila monster platform or something. I saw this on a video the other day, and I had no idea where GLP-1s came from. And if this video is accurate, I guess that was the genesis of that.
Isn't that crazy? A lot of those solutions are all around us. I think we have to look harder.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the people who do it'll be very profitable, I think. Having seen both sides, as hiring executive and as a recruiter now, what has surprised you most about this new thing you're doing, this new venture?
I don't know if it's a surprise, but I would say that, and I felt this way the last 5 or 6 years actually, but now, working with you, Jordan, I'm surprised at the lack of talent out there, and I don't know why. And maybe it's not just med device, right? Maybe it's, we talk about labor shortages in a lot of different industries, but
Yeah.
it sure seems like when we have a really good job, I would expect we'd have dozens of candidates, and it's challenging to get dozens of candidates. So I think that talent gap, it's a little scary, right? For a number of reasons, but hopefully it will rebound. But I think that's been my biggest worry in the last 2 years. Where is the talent going to be? The talent's super important, because if we dumb down medical device and we start letting it be, anybody can come in and be a medical device rep, well, guess what? Our income levels are all going to drop, right? And that's not what we want. To me, I want the highest quality medical device rep I can get, and I want them to be more of those people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the effect on the patient, too, if people aren't, up to speed and up to standard, where they've been in past generations. I do think you hit on something also with that labor shortage comment. Ask any recruiter, our number one problem is there are not enough good candidates to fill these jobs. That is the number one problem. It is a talent desert. It is a famine of available talent that can do this job the way you want it done. And so when we send you people, you may want 5. If we send you 2, you need to look at them really seriously, because they won't be there long. And for every job we recruit for, every client we have, there's 3 to 5 other clients or other companies that want that same person. It's unbelievable. The demand for early career talent too, copier sales reps, enterprise sales reps, ADP sales reps. The industry's starving for talent, and we see it every day. And I know you're seeing it now too. I mean, you saw it before, but now you're seeing it from our desk.
And I would say you're right. And I would say that it's also important for hiring managers to think about where these candidates are coming from. If they come from Chase MedSearch, guess what? I've been recruiting for 25 years. You've been recruiting for 30 years. So we know how to recruit. We know what talent looks like to a large degree. Now, we're never perfect, but boy, I would certainly, if you're a hiring manager and we send you somebody, you ought to look very closely, because we're doing our due diligence. That's for sure.
Yeah. What do you think candidates are misunderstanding about the recruiting process? Not just hiring managers, but candidates themselves.
I just find so many people, they don't have a mentor to help them along and understand. It's interesting. You'll talk to a person, a candidate, you say, well, you're obviously unhappy with what you're currently doing. That's why you're looking at this opportunity. Are you looking at any other opportunities? And they'll say, no, just this one. Because you contacted me. I'm like, boy, if you're going to put yourself in the job market, put yourself in the job market. You're going to give yourself a choice of one. Why not have a choice of 20 if you could? So I just feel like,
I'll say selfishly, I love it if you're only looking at my job.
yeah. You only come to us. That's great.
That.
But I just think that the younger folks, could use mentors. And I often ask, who's your mentor, right? And it's usually the person will say, my uncle or my dad or my mom or whatever. That's okay. But hopefully they have some sales experience and all that, because that's what we're really talking about, is who's your mentor in medical device sales that would understand, the business.
It touches on also a bigger theme where, you have these reps at companies, big companies, and they've built their entire network at that company. And they haven't really done as much development outside that company, even, building relationships with recruiters like you and me, or even people at other companies. And then all of a sudden their cheese gets moved and there's layoffs, or there's contraction, or there is a product recall, or their physician dies or moves or something. And now there's real challenges afoot. And so, in addition to mentoring, I think these experienced company reps really need to think hard about networking outside their own context, because I have dealt with so many people, almost from the day I opened the doors of this business, that got caught flat-footed, and they go unemployed for a long time, simply sometimes because they don't have the networks established, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think being proactive, if we give you a call, what's a minute, 10 minutes of your time to talk
Yeah.
to us, to learn about us, and we can learn about you, that only is helpful. And I agree with you. I think it's reactive versus proactive. I think if you're reactive, and boy, if you get laid off and you're off, you're off work for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, number one, you got to pay the bills. Number two,
Yep.
people start looking at you differently. Like, what
Yeah.
happened? Why were you laid off? Are you underperformer? I don't really understand why you're not employed right now. And that's sometimes hard to overcome.
Yeah, it is. And it's surprising the reactions you'll get sometimes. I had called a rep the other day about a really good startup, chance to be one of the first 2 commercial employees in the world for them, and went through it with her. And it is a little bit out of the box, but it's well funded. It's got great clinical data, reimbursement in place, all of this. And she was very dismissive and kind of rude. She just said, "This just sounds make believe. I'm not going to waste my time with this." And that was it. And fast forward 2 months, it's flying off the shelves. The reps are going to do way over plan. The equity's super valuable. And, this person, I get it. Everybody's at a different point in their life, but I don't forget the impression that made when they were so rude. I'm just being informative. You don't have to do that. But, she chose to do it. And you just remember stuff like that.
That's a great story. You asked earlier about, why I become a recruiter and this and that. I do strongly believe, and I hope people listen to this, life is about experiences. And one of the things that I didn't want to have done, I've always had an entrepreneurial kind of thing in my head, right? I wanted to do something small, a startup. And 11 years ago, I was able to do that. And largely it was because I was pretty good at it because of my grounding in these big companies. But I didn't want to go through my career, Jordan, and just say, hey, I was just at J&J and that's what I did. I fancy myself kind of a business builder. And, we built a business at J&J Biosurgery from 40 million to 400 million. We built a business at Solstice from 11 million to 106 million, sold it. So I like that part, but life's all about experiences. So if you're stuck in a big corporate job, and man, think about a startup, think about a small opportunity. Even if it doesn't work, it's the most exciting time in your life.
Yeah,
It really is.
that. Once you punch your ticket at a big company, try a small company, try a startup. You can always go back and do that again. If not where you were, somewhere else. But if your life circumstances allow you to take a risk, it might turn out to be the best thing you ever did in your entire career. And you'll have the most fun that you've had in who knows when. So great stuff. So we know what has motivated you to keep pushing throughout your career. I've got a few rapid fire. We're going to go game show before we close it out here a little bit. Favorite company you ever worked for?
Solstice. Close, Ethicon Biosurgery, close because of the culture.
Got it. Best manager you ever had and why?
Gentleman's name was Rahinish Huda, and unfortunately, he passed away unexpectedly in 2013, in a car crash. He was an amazing sales leader and marketing guy too. And he was about to become, I think, president of Biosense Webster at that point. He was great, and I'll tell you why he was so great. He believed in me, and he believed in me unequivocally, and I could feel it. He told me, I could sense it. He wasn't lying. He was honest. And boy, that just made me want to work my tail off for that guy.
Best piece of career advice you ever received?
So Rahinish used to say, the reward for good work it's more work. And if you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world. Do a good job, get more, right? And that was his message.
Oh, yeah.
Do a good job, get more. No one's going to promote you if you're not doing a good job. Do a good job and then ask for the promotion, right? The reward for good work is more work. Great saying.
What's one book every sales professional should read?
I think, there's a lot of sales process books. 6 or 7 years ago, I read Challenger Rep. I still think that's a dynamite book. I think that if I was a young rep in a lot of these industries in med device, you've got to be able to direct and take control because people don't know. And as long as you do it the right way, you really can move your sales process ahead dramatically faster if you can adopt some of the things that are in the Challenger Rep.
Biggest career risk you ever took?
My whole life until I was 36 years old was in the Southwest or West Coast. When I became 36, I got promoted. We had 3 kids and 1 on the way, and I told my wife I'd like to move to New Jersey for the promotion. And we had laughed in our lives that we were never going to be ever. We'd never even entertained living on the East Coast. So I think that was the biggest risk, and thank God I still have a very supportive wife, Mary Beth, and she's great. She didn't even bat an eye. She said, let's go. So I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. I think I know the answer to this one. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. 1 regular, 1 decaf.
We all have our rhythms. Mine is energy drink right when I wake up, followed by coffee. And
there you go.
Then we're ready to go. Early bird or night owl?
I love to get things done before anybody wakes up. I spent an hour doing some work with, what we're working on. And I went to the gym this morning and was all done before 9 a.m. And I was really happy about that. Definitely an early morning guy.
One person in MedTech you'd love to have dinner with?
I saw this guy back in 2014 in New York City. We went to a conference and it was Jack Welch. And I was astounded because I didn't know much about GE, but I know he was kind of a hard taskmaster and the bottom 10% was let go every year, supposedly. I don't know if those things are true, but he did talk about this grid called performance and attitude. And it's really how I run my whole sales management career has been on performance and attitude. If you've got a great attitude and you're a bad performer, well, that's because you're new, right? And we'll help you. We'll teach you and we'll bring you up in performance. If you've got, a really good record of performance, but your attitude is cruddy, then this may not be the spot for you, right? Because you're bringing everybody down. And if we can get you to the spot where you've got great attitude and great performance, that's where it's a home run. And that's where we aspire to get people to. He talked about that his entire talk. And I was spellbound because it aligned with what I believe exactly. So I would love to have coffee with Jack Welch.
Fantastic. If there's one message you'd like listeners to remember after hearing your story today, what would that be?
Life is about experiences. I'm not done yet. I got this one with you and I'm excited about it. I'm also at some point in my life going to do a nonprofit to help people. That's next on my agenda in the next maybe 5 or 6 years. Life's about experiences. Go have a bunch and it'll enrich everything you do and everything around you and all the people around you too.
Absolutely wise words. So let's hear, maybe the last question for this podcast is, for you, Jay Waggoner, what are you most excited about in this next chapter with Chase MedSearch?
I spent a lot of time recruiting in my last role, the national role. And I was able to help a lot of people get into med device and start their careers and help them and, maybe improve their lives, improve their livelihoods. I think now I get to do this 24/7. So I'm really excited about that. The companies, Jordan, that we represent and you represent are dynamite. They're super intriguing and exciting and interesting. It would be an experience for anybody to work at these companies. So I'm really happy that I'm doing this full time and helping people full time.
Yeah, you're doing a great job, Jay. Appreciate you being on today, and let's go get it.
Jordan, this is close to being famous I've ever been, so thank you for having me on again. Hey, listen, I already love what I'm doing, so yeah, let's go.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again.